You guys have been asking, y'all have been waiting, y'all have been pestering, and it's time to finally take a look at the tier list for set 9. So, as I said before, I'm not doing English only tier list anymore. You can always look back at those. If there's stuff that came out earlier with clan events that wasn't out there in JP, you can kind of, make your own conclusions based on how good you think the deck is. But, primarily I'm going to look at JP here, and then you can rewatch this in global when it's, actually relevant again. But we're going to take a look as usual. We have quite a few sources to look at today, and there's also a big change. So we've actually got quite a few changes going into this tier list onwards. So first things first, I now kind of bounce ideas off with some of the players that I deem as good players in Zero. So mostly people that qualified for the Vanguard Zero Championship, were at like the finals of the qualifiers themselves, top ranked players, people like that really put in a lot of time into the game, that have a good idea of what the meta should be. So that way it's not just my opinion, it's actually several people's opinion. I'm not gonna name who that is unless they wish to be shouted out, in which case, I'll do that from next time onwards. But this way, what is being shown is kind of more validated in that sense, but even then, it's always subjective and all that kind of stuff. But the other thing is that I'm now throwing out all the decks that are not really part of this like competitive deck circle. So I'm only going to be really showing you the decks that are like, okay, if you want to grind ranked, take one of these. If you want to bring it to tournament, bring one of these. So we're kind of going in with that mentality. So keep that in mind. Some of my favorite decks aren't in this anymore, and yours might not be either, but that, that just means it's not part of this like competitive high. I'm just trying to, because like there's gonna be more and more decks as we go on, and it's always gonna be like, I'm always gonna forget one or two old decks and just not put them in. So I think to just not have to run into future issues is better to just like cut them out right now, instead of have to like do a huge list of like 50 plus decks where, like 30 of them are at the bottom anyway. So it's like, it just takes up time, it takes up, like, it's just pointless basically. So let's get into it and take a look at it together. So first things first, let's run through the Gamebox tier list. I think, Gamebox and Game With. I'll look at any other sources we have. So Gamebox says MLB, Azel, and Maelstrom, as well as Eradicators are all tier 1. I definitely agree with this. I think MLB is still definitely one of the great decks, still does great things. Then tier 2, they put Dungaree, Tsukuyomi, The Blood, Shadows, and The End. So this is a pretty kind of like the next level. We've seen a lot of Dungaree success in the qualifiers. Tsukuyomi still remains to be that really good, like, tournament deck especially, and The Blood, and like these three are kind of on the lower end. And then they basically here, oh wait, hold on, this is two different lists. I just realized this is tournament. Whoa, okay, they leveled up. This is their tournament recommendation decks. So tier 1 being this, tier 2 being this, and this is the ranked ladder tier list. So here they don't put MLB in here, and they put MLB lower, and then they really just put like Chrome Duke in tier 2, for example, and then they put like, then we got Liberators, we got all the other decks basically. So you can see your Genesis, Bermuda, Blau, Ethics, all that kind of stuff. So they put a separate one now for the tournament, so really, which is kind of what I'm kind of catering for right now as well. So pretty interesting. Let's look at Game With here. So Game With, they have, let's see here, tier 1. Oh no, that's the new deck edition. So here we have tier 1, Eradicators, Azel, and MLB. Seems pretty fair. Tier 2, Glory down here, Dungaree, 2 variants of Spikes, and Tsukuyomi. So this is, a Cyfried version and then a Dudley version. So of course this is post Bad End Dragger, so keep that in mind. And then tier 3 is like Liberators, Artemis, Beast Deities, Blau, Break Ride, and stuff like that. So seems like there's quite a few differences, and I'm definitely not going to be looking at some of these lower decks, basically just looking at what is really the competitive stuff. But before that, the Vanguard Zero Championship Summer Day 1 concluded, which is the 128 player invitational from the people that qualified, through the means, and basically we have the conclusion of some of those things. So first things first, here we have the top 8 players that qualified. So we see there's 6 different Narukami's that entered, that are now in top 8. Then we have like 2 Gold Paladins or 3 Gold Paladins, 3 Gold Paladins. We have 2 Aqua Forces, 1 Novas, 1 Royals, or I think only 1 Royals, and then 1 Shadows, 1 Kagero. So quite a bit of variety here and there. A lot of Narukami we're seeing. We also have some statistics here. For example, this is the day 1 clan distribution. So we can see here it's like 26% Narukami, 18%, almost 19 Gold Paladin, 18% gold royals, 14% aquaforce, and like, you know, Narukami dominates this, but keep in mind there's 3 different variants for Narukami: Dungari, Eradicators, and the Blood. So of course this is like 3 different decks consisting this, whereas like gold it's mostly just Azel. So that's something to keep in mind here. But this shows you the general like tally of every clan. We even see like some Great Nature, Bermuda, Genesis, and stuff like that. And of course Great Nature had quite a bit of success throughout the qualifiers. It was in the finals like twice. So definitely a clan that's, in my opinion, quite competitive right now as well. So this is kind of the thing. Keep in mind this is a 2-deck format, so this is like each player has to bring 2 decks, so it's 128 players, sorry, 156 players that each had to bring 2 different decks. So that's something to keep in mind here as well. So now that we've seen this, let's move on to our own tier list. So I'm basically going to be looking at this in terms of also like this competitive tournament viability. So Tsukiyomi in tournaments especially pops off mega hard simply because of, you know, being able to legally stack, so it's amazing there. Gamebox kind of agrees as well. Blau ethics, I've kind of already talked about it in general. It's like when it pops off it's unbeatable, but when it bricks harder than anything else, and therefore it's like low tier 2. I think it's very fun, but I think that in general it really does struggle just because of its own build, like just because of what the deck actually is. So that's just kind of how it is. Then spikes, here we have spikes are, I would say, tier 1, simply because now they got bad end, and if you've lived through a bad end turn, you know how disgusting that is, and it's really, really disgusting. Mason, even though it's like Candlemas 2, it gives you early game plays when your opponent doesn't give you the limit break, and overall they also got a counter charger. So Spike's got some amazing tools, honestly, for 0, and that is definitely very important. The end, still hanging in there. We saw in the top 8, we still have a Kagero player in there, so definitely still worthy opponent, let's say, worthy deck of, you know, the competition. And so overall, I think the end is still up there, just because of like restands, control, and like all that stuff. MLB, definitely still in there. Every tier list sort of agrees that the MLB is still very much just a very strong deck. You know, it draws pieces and it pops off. That's all you can really say. It's not gated by limit break. It doesn't have to wait for anything. It just needs 2 counterblast to use Blaster Blade, and that's about it. Shadows are kind of in the same like kind of pile here. They're still good, but they're a bit slow, but they're still better than like a lot of other decks, so that's something to keep in mind. Pure Beast Deity I think is a bit too slow right now. Just like, it's very counterblast reliant, it's very like xenophobic as well, and it doesn't have the best pieces yet to be restanding. So I think when we get like Ethics Buster Extreme and Reverse, it'll be a lot better, but for the time being, it's kind of lackluster, just a little bit. Azel definitely at the top. Being able to not only like spam the field super easily and just like refill the board very quickly, it also has the ability to just like crit your opponent easily. It has the spirits that basically are just like, you know, extra attacks in a way because you get to pop intercepts. So it really is amazing. I think Azel definitely deserves a high spot here. Then we have Polaris. I'll put Polaris around here somewhere. Polaris is good simply because it is multi-attack. It is deck filtering, it is card draw, it is a lot of things, it is power. So not only are you hitting triggers consistently, setting up intercepts consistently, like drawing cards consistently, searching out non-triggers from your deck consistently, it's just a very strong deck overall. And especially in the right hands, we saw in both qualifiers, Great Nature made it to finals, and overall it was just very, very strong. Glory is still being seen as one of the best decks, simply because it is, like, Glory is an amazing win con. Maelstrom is literally tons of resources. The deck can push, you'll notice that all these decks can generally push 2 damage per turn quite easily. So tier 1 is generally just any deck that can push through 2 intercepts and still do 2 damage per turn. So any deck that can do that, Polaris technically 2, so that's why it's like high tier 2, is gonna be up here. Coral is considered to be like one of these like good decks that, because it's tanky and because it draws so much, it can get away with like running crits, and therefore it picks up random wins like that. So it's still considered to be one of these like kind of competitive decks in that sense. The Blood, considered to be somewhere up here, I would say, kind of like in this same array as the other decks. It's very strong. It's one of the other like lead Narukami archetypes, I would say. And overall, I think it's just like, it's good because it has that built-in crit now. We thought like, oh, Kanamas 3 is way too much, but turns out it's pretty okay. And overall, it just has, like, any Narukami deck can run Shiden and Ryan and being able to steal intercepts, and that's going to make it very, very strong to just like steal wins just like that from any state of the game. Dungary, definitely up here as well. Saw a lot of success in the Vanguard Zero Championship qualifiers, and I think for that reason we'll definitely see it in the finals in the day 2 as well on the 30th. Keep in mind, me and Kai will be live streaming that, so we're going to be doing the English restream of that on Twitch. Make sure to follow me on Twitch to stay tuned for when we do that. That'll be at 6 a.m. CST on the 30th of August. So yeah. So Dungary I think definitely is very strong because not only does it have the ability to gain crit and retire and gain power, it also again can run the Desert Gunner package, and so therefore you get to not only get that extra crit and the power and all that stuff, but you're also just storming them with damage very quickly. Liberators for now are a disappointment, I would say. There's like they're just lacking stuff right now. This is going to get better because they're getting plenty of support throughout the the course of the Limit Break, the Legion, not the Legion, the Link Joker era. And so they are going to get better. For the time being, they're just too slow. They don't really do enough. They superior call, but not more than Azel. They gain power, but it doesn't really matter compared to Azel. And like, that's about all they do. They don't really have this like other like extra crit or like some kind of guard restrict or like anything like that. And so we're going to have to wait a little bit, at least until they get their multi-attack with like Ganslot Zenith, for them to get better. And of course they could drop some buffs here and there. That'd be nice. Animations would be appreciated too, so that's something there. Gauntlet Buster, well, not Gauntlet Buster, but Eradicators as an archetype I think is definitely one of the best decks in the game right now. The deck does so much that other decks just don't have the tools to do, and it really is amazing. I think it has a crit-based Vanguard that can OTK your opponent randomly when they're at 3. It has a restanding Vanguard that can blow through PGs very early. It has all this retire, the break ride is free retire. It has power gaining columns thanks to the grade 1s. It has Rising Phoenix abuse. It has counter charge. It just has everything gunning for it from its first set of introduction. So it's also only going to get more support in the future, so we're going to see how it actually scales into the future. So I think Eradicators definitely are also looking very, very good. This positioning of decks can be argued. For now I'm just throwing it around like this. I'm not saying like that Maelstrom is better than all of these. They're just kind of all on like a similar power level, I would say, and so are these. But here I'm a bit more careful with the positioning, but here is definitely like it's anyone's game, I would say, for the most part. Maybe this order is kind of okay, but here I think it's definitely like shuffling around kind of. So yeah. Then finally Artemis is pretty strong, but my feelings towards this deck. But like my feelings aside, the deck just kind of bricks on itself on its own. And it also just, like, it pops off on its own accord, it breaks off its own accord, and you just can't really do much about that. Like, if you can break ride smoothly, if you can ride chain smoothly, you're gonna have a good day. If you got your Chamomiles and your Melissas and your Soul, you're gonna have an amazing day. But if you don't, not much is happening. So that's something that you need to keep in mind. So yeah, that's kind of what my tier list is looking like right now in this set. So I took some time before I wanted to get this out. I played a lot in the first season because I was tryharding with this deck, and even while I was doing that I wasn't really sure what I was trying to do, like what the meta was looking like. And now I mostly play with Eradicators, and I could really say that they are a very strong deck. But all these other decks that I show here in tier 1 definitely deserve that tier 1 spot for sure. You can argue some of these do too, but I think for now this looks like a pretty good way to look at the meta. But of course, keep in mind, like, don't take this and be like, okay, DF said this, therefore this is the golden rule. No, like, anyone can argue against some points that I make, for some points that I make. This is subjective. This is something we should be having a discussion on. This is my perception of the meta. Now I have some advice from other people as well, but I'm always down to have a discussion about it. I don't, like, this isn't the be-all end-all, so don't, just like treat this as like, this is the fact. Like, no, there is plenty of room for maneuver, and so there's some decks that didn't even include in this that some people could go like, oh, actually, so there's plenty of points for discussion. But on that note, that's gonna be it for me today. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Don't forget, the finals will be streamed on the 30th, 6 a.m. CEST. But on that note, I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.